We all remember that Tiwi Hanksgiving night in 2009. The powerful response to trauma is to master its science. By early 2002 IR Hydra real time, played out under the harsh glare of police lights on a quiet Florida street. For years, Ellen Nordegren was simply Tiger's wife, a figure defined entirely by his shadow and eventually his scandals. But to see her in 2026 is a genuine shock to the system. She didn't just survive the fallout. She orchestrated a quiet, stunning revolution, trading the tabloid glare for a life that is authentically, finally, entirely hers. The transformation of Ellen Nordegren is not the typical Hollywood glow-up. There is no reality television contract, no lifestyle vitamin brand, no dramatic reinvention engineered by a publicist. The 2026 version of the woman once known as the stoic, silent shadow of the greatest golfer in history is something far more radical. She is entirely, stubbornly normal. To see her today at a South Florida youth sports complex, clutching a lukewarm coffee, wearing a sensible linen blazer, corralling a small army of children, is to witness a person who has successfully performed a vanishing act in plain sight. She didn't just leave a marriage. She left the very concept of celebrity at the curb, and in doing so, she became the most intriguing person in any room she enters. At 46, she possesses a kind of weathered serenity that only comes from surviving a Category 5 social hurricane. The most jarring shift is not that she looks radiant, though she does. It is that she is now a mother of 6. For those who still picture her with just Sam and Charlie, the math of her current life is its own kind of revelation. Since 2019, Ellen and her partner, former NFL star Jordan Cameron, have built a sprawling blended family. Together, they have 3 young children, Zeta, Freya, and Arthur, plus Jordan's son from previous relationship. Her world is a whirlwind of school runs, teething, and teenage drama. The Swedish nanny who once cared for the world's elite is now the CEO of a household that requires more logistics than a PGA Tour stop. But the real twist in Ellen's metamorphosis is not found in her family tree. It is found on her office door. While the world waited for her to write a tell-all book or sit down with Oprah for a $20 million interview, Ellen was quietly sitting in a classroom at Rollins College. She didn't just get a degree to pass the time. She chased a calling. Today, she is a licensed mental health counselor with her own private practice, Yen Therapy. The poetic irony is almost too perfect. The woman whose private trauma was dissected by every tabloid on the planet now spends her days helping others navigate their own emotional wreckage. She took the shards of her broken life and turned them into a lens through which she helps others see clearly. By 2026, her relationship with Tiger Woods has also reached a state of grace that many found impossible to imagine back in 2009. They are not just cordial co-parents, they are genuine allies. When Charlie Woods received his state championship ring earlier this year, there was Ellen standing inches away from her ex-husband, laughing as if the fire hydrant and the scandals belonged to a different lifetime. She refused to be a victim. She refused to be a villain. She chose to be a healer. The woman we see today is not Tiger's ex. She is a powerhouse mother, a dedicated therapist, and a woman who proved that the best way to handle a public explosion is to walk away from the blast zone and build something beautiful in the quiet space beyond. To understand the full magnitude of Ellen Nordegren's 2026 reality, one must look past the blonde hair and the serene Florida sunshine to the calculated intellectual architecture of her independence. When the dust settled on the most expensive divorce in sports history, the world expected a cliché. We expected a revenge shopping spree, a series of high-profile flings with European elites, or perhaps a permanent retreat to a private island in the Swedish archipelago. Instead, Ellen did something far more subversive. She went to school. And she didn't just enroll, she stayed for a decade. At Rollins College, she was not the ex-wife or a tabloid fixture. She was a student of psychology. There is a profound, almost cinematic irony in the fact that while the paparazzi were literally climbing trees to get A blurry shot of her through a window. Ellen was sitting in a fluorescent-lit classroom studying trauma responses and the science of human emotion. This was not a vanity project. By the time she stood at the podium as the 2014 commencement speaker, graduating with a 3.96 GPA, she had effectively dismantled the scorned woman narrative and replaced it with something far more powerful. The image of a woman who understood exactly why her life had imploded, and more importantly, how to build a foundation that no scandal could ever shake again. Her settlement was estimated at $100 million, but her true wealth in 2026 is her absolute autonomy. She didn't just buy a house, she built a fortress of privacy. She famously demolished a $12 million North Palm Beach mansion just to rebuild it from the ground up, a metaphor for her life that was lost on no one. The true masterpiece of her reconstruction, however, is her career. Think about it for a moment. The woman who was once the most hunted prey of the tabloid machine now spends 40 hours a week holding space for other people's pain. She turned her own experience of public humiliation into a professional credential, proving that the most sick, the transformation is complete. She has achieved what so few in the orbit of great men ever manage. She eclipsed the shadow of the man she left. In her private practice, she is not Tiger's former partner. She is a clinician. The Tiger's X label has finally fallen away, not because of time alone, but because she outgrew the skin of that identity entirely. Before the private jets and the billion-dollar divorce, Ellen and her twin sister Josephine were working summer jobs long at a local clothing store to fund their education. It was a life of simple Swedish sensibilities, clean lines, hard work, and an almost sacred devotion to privacy. The twist in this particular fairy tale didn't involve a glass slipper. It involved a job offer as a nanny for Swedish golfer Jesper Parnevik that moved to the United States would inadvertently place her in the crosshairs of a sporting revolution. When she packed her bags for Florida, she wasn't looking for a billionaire. She was looking for a way to pay for her psychology textbooks. At the time, Tiger Woods was not just a golfer. He was a global deity, a corporate titan who seemed to exist on a different atmospheric plane than the rest of humanity. When he first encountered Ellen, she was not impressed by the red shirts or the trophy counts. In fact, she initially turned him down. She was a young woman focused on her studies, uninterested in the high-octane, ego-driven circus that trailed the world's #1 athlete. It was the first hint of the grit she would later display on a much larger stage. But Tiger, known for his relentless pursuit of any goal he set his sights on, was persistent. The courtship was a whirlwind of international travel and hushed conversations, a prodigy meeting his match in a woman who refused to be dazzled by his fame. It was a clash of two worlds, the loud, commercialized American dream and the quiet, reserved Swedish reality. As their relationship deepened in the early 2000s, the contrast between them was almost cinematic. Tiger was dominance personified, while Ellen was the Nordic calm, the grounding force who provided a sanctuary away from the cameras. She was the silent queen of the PGA Tour, a fixture in the gallery who never gave an interview and never sought the microphone. Friends from that era describe her as fiercely protective of their private world. The creative irony is that the very wall of privacy she helped Tiger build around their lives would eventually be the same wall that hid the secrets, which would one day bring the entire structure crashing down. She was unknowingly guarding a fortress that was already hollowing out from the inside. The seeds of the 2026 version of Ellen, the independent clinical psychologist, were being sown in the quiet moments between tournaments as she realized that being the wife of was a role she could play, but not a person she could be. In the grand history of celebrity unions, few spectacles have matched the sheer opulence of October 5, 2004. For Ellen Nordegren, the journey from a quiet Swedish upbringing to the altar of the Sandy Lane Resort in Barbados was more than a wedding. It was a royal coronation, signaling her official entry into the upper echelon of global icons. Tiger Woods didn't just host a ceremony. He staged a takeover of an entire island. He spent a reported $1.5 million to rent all 112 rooms of the Sandy Lane complex for over a week, chartered every helicopter on the island, and rented out the only local boat company to ensure no paparazzi could approach by air or by sea. It was a fortress of romance, built with the kind of precision tiger usually reserved for Sundays at Augusta, under a white-netted pagoda decorated with 10,000 black roses flown in from around the globe. Ellen stood at the 19th hole of the Green Monkey Golf Course. At 24 years old, she was the picture of effortless elegance in an off-white sleeveless gown, her blonde hair catching the last rays of a Caribbean sunset that seemed staged specifically for her. The guest list was a who's who of American excellence: Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, and Oprah Winfrey among the 120 witnesses to what appeared to be the beginning of an eternal dynasty. Hootie and the Blowfish performed under a massive tent. It was a $10 million sunset that promised a lifetime of untouchable happiness. Looking back from 2026, the creative irony of that day is staggering. The most expensive detail of the entire wedding was not the roses or the caviar. It was the name of the 155-foot luxury yacht where they spent their first night as husband and wife,